Hello, and welcome to this session on selling to the new buyer. I'm Shubhanjan, the founder of PitchLink. A bit about me. PitchLink is a sales technology stack SaaS, which is a buyer seller engagement platform. We believe that conversions follow from conversations. So our platform enables buyers and sellers to have asynchronous communication and conversation, and that basically leads to more uh, conversions. I'm also a podcast host. I have three podcasts that I host currently. Bits About Books, where I speak to authors of breakthrough books in sales and marketing and business. Uh, I have had guests like Cash Nickerson, Rand Fishkin, and so on. I do a SaaS focused podcast called SaaS Stories. I've had great SaaS founders like uh, that of Freshworks, which is going to be unicorn out of India. Um, and I do a podcast called the Buyer Side Chat, which I'm most excited about. Because if you look at the buying selling process, it is essentially a two-sided exercise. Someone is selling and someone is buying. However, the discourse in the public domain is overwhelmingly focused on the sales process, as if the buying process does not exist. So whether you look at books, you look at podcasts, blogs, training, it's all about selling. We thought that we are missing out significantly on the discourse which is around the buying process. In fact, like today's session about the new buyer, that's also about that, exactly that. And we are trying to bring real buyers to come and talk about their buying process, which will give us a more rounded view of the entire process. I wrote a book called What I Learned Today. It is out of my 500 posts that I did on LinkedIn over 500 days. And I have three US patents, which I got for technologies I developed for a product which I just developed before PitchLink. It is a visual multilingual learning platform. Enough about me. Let me hear a bit about you. So, tell me a bit about your role, what you are selling currently, and who you are selling to. Well, I would not stop during the session today to take questions, but like now, please do put your information or your questions in the chat, and I'm going to circle back and respond to as many as I can within the given time. So take a minute, please tell me a bit about you. What's your role, what you are selling currently, and who you are selling to. Okay, so for starters, we need to understand that we are in a buyer first world. The old methods of identifying and selling to a prospect are not working anymore. And you don't have to take my word for it. There are many data points available. One, from Forrester, it says the rate of lead to conversion in B2B sales is 1.85%. So for every 100 leads, qualified leads that are handed down to the sales team, 1.85 will convert. That's not a great place to be. When I talk to people in the B2B circles, it is quite accepted that the rate is around 5% at best. And this has come down from 8 to 10% in the 1980s today. So over the last 20, 30 years, the conversion rate has significantly come down. And today at 1.85%, we feel that we are meeting the benchmark. But this is something we need to think about, because this is what keeps me up at night. How can we say something which is succeeding less than 2% or say 5% of the time is successful? In any other sphere of our lives, that would be an utter failure. What led to this situation? David Cancel, he's the founder of Drift, and he wrote a book called Conversational Marketing. In the book he writes, I have watched the balance of power shifting from supply to demand, from company to customer. The way we have been doing marketing and sales is broken. It was created for a world that no longer exists. We have to think about this. The fact is, the buyer who was buying from us 30 years back and the buyer who is buying from us today has changed. And it's not the same buyer. The buyer of then used to value the salesperson because the information asymmetry, and we'll talk about that in a moment, used to favor the salesperson. The salesperson was always better informed than the buyer. However, the shifts towards the buyer has been in the making for a while. Way back in 1997, Murray Alexander created the first customer success department for Vantive. You can look it up. So customer success, the fact that a product should be focused on the customer success, this idea is not new, as you will see. In 1999, the Cluetrend Manifesto, which outlined the beginning of the shift to the buyer, was written, and so was Seth Godin's permission marketing. And we'll touch upon these points as we go along. The first idea of account-based marketing was mooted by ITSMA in 2004. HubSpot soon followed with the idea of inbound. And inbound is one of the first quite clearly buyer intent-centric idea. 2008, Project VRM was launched by Harvard University's Berkman Center for Internet and Society, and it was led by Doc Searles, who in 2012 wrote a seminal book called The Intention Economy. And VRM, by the way, stands for Vendor Relationship Management. And he said that there was a necessity and there was sort of the making of a vendor relationship management by the buyer, just the way we sellers have customer relationship management or CRM. And by 2011, 2015, which is like 5-7 years back, account-based marketing, customer success, all these things became mainstream. So this shift that I'm talking about has been in the making for a while. However, in the recent past, there have been triggers which sort of completely turned this information asymmetry and the process from the seller side to the buyer, from the supply side to the demand side. These are the buyers are not buying interruption anymore. Traditional sales is about interruption. You have to interrupt a buyer to be able to sell to them. But the buyers are resisting it. That is why getting a meeting, and I'll share some data, getting a meeting is so difficult. That is why getting a follow-up meeting is even more difficult. Make no mistake, we're in the permission economy. We cannot engage with a buyer unless the buyer explicitly gives us permission. There are legal challenges, which we'll talk about, and there are simply real world problem. If the buyer is not wanting to engage, he's not going to engage, no matter what we do or what we offer. All those ideas about great smart scripts and get the idea of FOMO into the buyer that next quarter our prices are going to go up, that doesn't cut it anymore. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I don't know why we still talk about such things. Oftentimes when I'm talking on this subject, I recall and I state this, that the great David Ogilvy, the advertising guru who wrote this book, Ogilvy on Advertising, look him up, wrote in that book that the customer is not a moron, she's your wife. The customer is not a moron, she's your wife. Of course, he was talking in a B2C context. Remember, the customer is not a moron. You cannot just, you know, talk your way through and make somebody buy. The last point, which again we will talk about in detail, is that we are entering the era of ethical analytics. All the tools, all the tools, all the processes which are dependent upon surreptitious tracking of data are going to fail, are going to fail. Either they will fail the legal test or they will fail the real world test, because buyers are not appreciating surreptitious tracking without permission anymore. So this is what's happening to interruption selling. It's a complete no entry. Buyers are resisting it totally. Buyers are resisting it totally. And there is data. Email open rate for retail emails is down to 2.28%. You send out 100 mails, only less than 3 emails will be opened. Telemarketing response rate is down to 6.86%, which is how we see our response is that, oh, put a robocaller, let a machine dial, and the moment a human picks up, we will talk. We are treating the symptoms, not the cause. It takes at least 8 calls before a prospect responds. So once you have connected, you need to make 8, you have to connect with them 8 times before you get any kind of response. And I can quote 2 studies here. One by Chorus.ai. They're a conversational marketing tool which analyzes sales calls. And their state of the conversational marketing report, they said that it takes a SDR 106 calls to get a meeting. 106 calls before they can get a meeting. In 2012, this is 2020, in 2012, Baylor University's Keller Center for Research did a study to quantify the importance and effectiveness of cold calling as a prospecting tool, and found that it took 209 calls for one appointment or referral. So either a person gives an appointment or says, hey, I'm not the right guy, talk to X. 209 calls. So 106 calls by SDRs or telecalling, trying to get an appointment, 209 calls. Think about these 2 data points. So the result is telemarketing failure rate is 98%. And that's not all. There is a cost of interruption. Why are buyers refusing interruption? Because it is expensive. If you take your personal interruption and studies related to personal work, every time you get a call or a mail, you're working and you see a ping and you go to it, studies are showing it takes you 10 to 15 minutes to get back to that point. And you know, how does that translate? Interruptions eat up 28% of the workday. I'll quantify it further. Small businesses in the US lose $500 million a year by handling unwanted calls. This is only calls. I'm not talking of mails, only calls. Interruptions are essentially bringing in unuseful information to the target. So lots of information overload, things that you have not asked for. It's because somebody else wants to give it to you. And what's the result? The information overload is costing, and these are obviously US data because that's the only place all these things are tracked. We don't have a lot of data from other places, but it's an indicative number. Information overload is costing the US economy 900 billion. That's 1 trillion, nearly $1 trillion a year. So I have a question for you at this point. Please do respond in the chat. I'm keeping track of these, and I'll come back to those as we complete. Uh, do you personally, are you feeling the resistance in your prospects to engage with them when you want them to engage? Because you are on a schedule, you have a quota to meet. You have been given a bunch of leads saying, hey, this guy's downloaded a white paper, this guy's came and left their email in the chat bot, and so on and so forth. So these guys are interested. Go talk to them. What is your experience? Are you getting through? Are you getting face-to-face meetings? If you're getting face-to-face meetings, are these the right guys? Do you see resistance? Just tell me on the side. I'll continue and come back to this. So the point I'm headed to is this: selling with permission is the key. The buyer has changed. The buyer is not waiting for you or me to go with a bunch of data and tell them and regale them with stories. You know, your competitor has bought this new machine, or I have just installed a new ERP in your in this so and so company, and this is the kind of benefit they've got, and all of that. And this is getting proven over and over again. Look at this study from Gartner. It's a CSO update of 2020. It says sellers will have only 17% opportunity. And by the way, this is for one buyer buying from multiple vendors. So for if he's of the 100% of his time, and this is the breakup, and you can find the Gartner CSO update online, it's available. Of the 100% of the time, B2B buyers are considering to spend only 17% of their time meeting with potential suppliers. So if you're in a space where there are likely to be 4 or 5 competitors, you will have 2% of your time to influence them. And the balance 90%, 98% of the time, something else is influencing them. And you can see that the scenario has changed. Permission selling is very evident. Rise of inbound. Rise of inbound is essentially about somebody showing interest in your content. Your content, which is related to your area of expertise, your service or your product. And that is where a prospect is coming and looking through your content, giving you the indication, hey, at this point in time, I'm interested about this. And he's possibly opting in, and I'll come about opting shortly, opting in to your newsletter and so on. Account-based marketing, product-led growth, all of these are indicative of permission selling. The rise of peer reviews, G2, Capterra, TrustRadius. Again, the buyer is not looking for your data, your publicity material, your promotional material, your literature, and so on. They're looking at peer reviews. They're trying to see what their colleagues in the industry, in other companies are doing. They don't care about your data. The most evident thing is about buyers engaging through an opt-in model. That's the most evident indication that the buyer is interested. And by the time they're ready to opt in, it is also too late and the deal is super competitive. Think about that. Because I have now made up my mind, which means I've already done my research. Remember that Gartner slide. Only 17% with suppliers. The balance 83% with their own stuff, where they're doing their own research. They're talking to their own people. So it's already super competitive. According to the book Wireless Rules, the new strategies for customer relationship management anytime, anywhere, Frederick Newell and Catherine Lemon details that he is also opting on. Will you agree to listen? It's not enough for customers to opt in. They have to listen to your message. right? I opt into a newsletter, but I don't open it. What's the point? So they have to opt on. Opting when? Will you tell me when you'd like to listen? So is there a way I can figure out that my customer tells me, hey, I'm really interested in this buyer-seller relationship thing, but I would like to read about it only once a month. And can you send me like between 7th and 10th? Because that's when I have the mind space to look at something external. After that, my life catches up. Opting where? Will you tell me the location in which you'd like to hear or not hear from me? I cannot just bombard you with material, with mails, with messages, just because you opted in somewhere. It's not a blanket permission. Opting how? Will you tell me how and by what means you'd like me to reach you? These are all things which you have to keep in mind when you say that you respect the buyer's permission to sell to him. And this is the data. 59% of buyers prefer to do research online. 67% is digital, the journey. And 80% of buyers prefer data from articles rather than advertisements. As I was saying, that I would rather look at analysis from Gartner or from Forrester or industry body than just look at some stuff that you have whipped up and sent to me. Permission marketing is trust marketing. And you need to understand its relevance. Trust has to be earned again and again. Just because I've given you permission doesn't mean you can keep doing something. It's a blanket thing. So once I've opted in, I'm there for you for the rest of my life. It doesn't really work that way. The new permission economy is all about trust and the assertive buyer. The buyer will throw you out if he's not willing or if he feels that you're invading or you are misusing the trust he has reposed in you. And this is the point where we need to talk about analytics, because analytics has become the buzzword besides AI and ML, which is a separate topic altogether. We have been indiscriminately tracking people, and there are so many stories I can talk about. I do not want to get there. We'll touch upon a few, but that's not the topic. The topic is that any kind of user behavior data has to be collected with permission. It has to be ethically collected, which is also the connection with trust. Because every time we talk about sales, the leaders of sales always say that the trust is the underpinning of any transaction. If a customer doesn't trust you, they're not going to buy from you. And trust is at various levels. But you cannot start that with a conversation where you are surreptitiously tracking the user's behavior. The buyer will control what information the seller gets to see. That's my cold coffee. Surreptitious tracking will be a thing of the past. And all the tools, and we'll touch upon that, all the tools today that sell on that premise that I will help you see what your buyer is doing when, will lose market share or will become illegal or they have to change. But if that is their core offering, that I let you see what your buyer is doing, then there's a problem. Everybody knows GDPR, CCPA, the Facebook Cambridge Analytica fiasco, I would say, disaster, which basically refocused everybody on privacy, and numerous high-profile data breaches. You are surreptitiously collecting data, somebody else breaches your system and takes away that data. We have had, I mean, every year there has been like 5, 10, 20 large data breaches where millions of credit card details, personal details, and so on have been taken away by bad actors. We have to be very mindful about this. The cost of data breach and why it is important. Why it is important not only to be ethical in collecting, but actually protecting that data. That becomes your job. If the buyer has reposed the faith in you, managing that data becomes your primary responsibility, because the cost of data breach is soaring. And so is the impatience of customers whose privacy is being routinely violated by the custodians. So either you are collecting the data surreptitiously and sharing it with third parties who is getting breached, and as a result, my data is in the public domain. Bessemer Venture Partners State of the Cloud report predicted that the global cost will touch 2.1 trillion of data breach. BVP partner Alex Ferreira in his data privacy engineering roadmap says, today there's not just a rift, but a chasm between where data privacy technology processes and regulations should be and where they are, thus creating a massive amount of privacy debt. We all knew about the technical debt, where we were taking shortcuts to build something quickly, put it out in the domain, and then come back and spend enormous amount of money fixing those shortcuts, which we consciously took, by the way. Same thing is going to happen to privacy. If we do not take care of it today, we have to pay a huge price as businesses. And this is something the buyer is not going to tolerate. The buyer is not going to pay for. So given this scenario, how do you sell to the new buyer? First, you need to stop asking essentially the wrong question to yourself and to your technology, training, and leadership choices. So you're asking this question: how can we make selling easy? If you see most of the books, training, tools, you just go out and see what is their headlines. We'll make selling easy. We'll make selling easy. And I think that's precisely the wrong question to ask. The question that we should be asking, which by the way is a best-selling secret, is how can we make buying easy? Because remember, making selling easy does not guarantee a sale. Making buying easy is likely to give you far better opportunity to conclude the transaction. And there's a reason why. Because buying, B2B buying has become extremely complex. It's a very complex process. The same Gartner report that I mentioned, the CSO report 2020, buyers are saying that buying is hard. You can read the slide. And by the way, if you guys take a snapshot of this presentation, of this slide, and you tweet it to me at Hello Shubhanjan, that's my Twitter handle, at Hello Shubhanjan, I will send you the entire deck to you. Okay. So if you take a snap of this slide, a screenshot, and tweet it to me at hello_Shubhanjan, I will send this whole deck to you so you can keep it for your reference. Anyway, back to this. B2B buying journey, 77% of buyers state that their latest purchase was very complex, which is why 53% of B2B buyers are taking longer to purchase. And remember, buying is never the first option. The moment someone finds something needs change, the first response is, can we fix it with something that we already have? Can our internal resources find a workaround? Do we need to purchase? It goes through many steps before the vendor comes into the scene. And we typically enter the scene pretty late, where everything has been established. But which means that the buyer has sort of made up their mind who are the vendors they want to deal with. It's a large number of people who are involved in any B2B buying decision, 7 decision makers. It varies depending upon what you are buying and how many people are impacted. It could be even 20 people, a buying committee. And all these people have specific interest in that purchase decision, and they have their point of view, and any one of them can scuttle a purchase. You see the link with ABM? Yeah. So 22% longer sales cycles. And this is changing rapidly. Buying is a strategic decision, which we are trying to influence using our tactical approach of need analysis and solution selling. The current model of need-based selling was devised by Dale Carnegie in 1937. 1937. It worked then. The buyer is essentially asking, what will happen when we bring this new solution in? What will it disrupt? So they're running a business. They are not just going to buy something and see their life turn upside down. So we have to engage with the buyer early enough to assure them that our solution is not going to disrupt their tech stack or their way of working. It will only reduce the problems that they've identified in the first place. For the buyer, it's a strategic decision. For sales, it is a tactical fit solution to need moment. So we are trying to fit a tactical approach to a strategic situation. And no wonder we are failing 95% of the time. So this is, according to the sales folks like us, this is the buyer's journey, the IDA framework. Simple, linear, awareness, interest, consideration, decision. You look at any sales related book and it will talk to you about the IDA solution. In reality, it is anything but. So this was your journey according to sales folks, and this is the real journey according to Gartner. It's extremely complex. One person who has written significantly about this, Sharon Drew Morgan, she talks about the buyer's journey in 13 steps, and the vendor does not appear till the 10th step. There are many models, and all of that talk about what you see here. It's an extremely complex process involving multiple people, multiple considerations, and so on. We have to remember the buyer is not buying our product. The buyer is buying the outcome that our product or service promises. So they're looking at the outcome. They don't care whether they're buying Salesforce or they're buying Pipedrive or they're buying MailChimp or they really don't care. What they care is, can I get my design done easily and can I resize it quickly? That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for Canva. And while that process is on, we need to solve tactical and transactional problems they face, externally with vendors and internally with their own teams. So demanding synchronous time without clear communication of value, which is what we typically do, which is why we fail, is at the crux of the problem. This is because instead of letting our customers buy when it is convenient for them, we have made it all about us. So David Cancel, whom I had quoted earlier, founder of Drift, in the same book he writes, why do we expect a prospect to give us time so that we can try to fit our solution to their problem? It's worth considering. Why do we expect a prospect to give us time so that we can try to fit our solution to their problem? So please give me time. I'll come and meet you. I will go through a process of understanding your problem, and then I'll tell you how I fit my solution to that. Why would they do that? There are many transactional problems, sharing of information without downloads, management and sharing friction. It's 5 vendors sending collaterals which need to be shared with 8 people internally, each of them managing 5 vendors collaterals, reading them, keeping track of them, saving them. It's a mess. And getting a buy-in from internal stakeholders, it's a big challenge. How do you manage? It's very, very complex. Today, we are doing it using mail, cloud drives, permission, downloads, managing internal sharing, voice, mails, text, face to face, minutes of the meeting, again mail, collaborative suites like online office, etc. So just imagine how many moving parts are there for a buyer to manage this internal need for change, which necessitated the requirement to buy a new product and evaluate a new product. We are running out of time, so I will quickly tell you what has been the shift in the value transaction landscape. The old was selling, the new is buying, face to face, physical to remote, through interruption, zero interruption, supply led, demand led, one to one, many to many. Multiple people from the seller side will eventually engage with multiple people on the buyer side. Trust in salesmen, it is a lot more personal. Today, it's more trust in brand. Not transparent. Here, transparency is the key because it's you are buying from people all over the world, and it's very difficult to vouch for anything. Without permission, with permission. Focus on vanity matrices. How long did he look at my slide number 3? How long was he watching my video? So on and so forth. To real actionable signals and intent. Question for you, if you don't mind, just put it up in the panel. Besides, what tools are you currently using for sharing content and collaterals and engagement with your prospect? So whatever tools you're using, it doesn't matter. If you can share that with me, it can be cloud drives, it can be some other sharing platforms, mails, whatever you're doing. And how are you engaging with your prospects? Is it through chat apps? Is it through live chat? Is it through, again, phone calls, whatever, mobile apps? Just tell us. I'll give you a few minutes. Sorry, few seconds. Yeah. So what's next? It's time to rethink. No two ways about it. We need to make it easy for the buyer to buy by supplying information. We should help them gather and collate and manage information. We should help them navigate and getting buy-in from internal stakeholders. If they're the decision maker or they're the point person, we need to understand that and then sort of help them navigate the internal complexities and help them manage this entire process with the least amount of friction. We will have to rethink where we start the seller's journey. We have to stop thinking about the buyer's journey because we don't know anything about the buyer's journey. Each buyer's journey is unique. Why each buyer has decided to buy at that point of time that particular product will be a different story. Everybody will have a different decision-making path. So let's not think about it. Let's think about the seller's journey. How can we engage with potential prospects as early as we can? When do we start our interaction with the prospect? Right now, we are too late. We are talking to them at a point of time when they have practically made up their mind. And we have to invest time in thinking and actioning how we build our trust and grow relationships. And we have to rethink the tools we use to deliver extraordinary outcomes to our customers. We have to think in terms of the outcome and not in terms of our product. I'm happy to take your questions, share your thoughts. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I hope it was useful and you had fun listening to me. Thank you very much.